This video is going to be a film study examination of the Ravens run game, but specifically an element or a part of their option game concepts. I'm going to use a couple of phrases during this video, key breakers and false pulls being two of the main ones that I'll refer to a handful of times. The Ravens have utilized option concepts dating back to the historic season that Greg Roman coordinated and organized in 2019. A lot of those option concepts have evolved over the years. Some of them have fallen by the wayside or been used sparingly, especially since Todd Monken was hired as the offensive coordinator in 2023. Here late in the season, there's been a re-evolution or reboosting of those option concepts, and they're utilizing false pulls oftentimes, whereby a guard from one side of the offensive formation pulls to the other side, and it moves an inside linebacker because of that key, that read that the inside linebacker is initially seeing, and that puts them in worse position to defend the actual point of attack. I think it's an interesting development. I believe that it's something that's going to force defenses to evolve the way they defend the option. I'll try to explain it to you during the course of this video. I think I have 12 plays queued up here. You're going to hear multiple option-based terms or phrases used in this video, and I'll try to explain them. If I don't do a good enough job, feel free to let me know in the comment section. Number one, the impact, the effectiveness of the Ravens' run game has grown in the last 5 weeks. Since their Week 11 loss to the Steelers, I don't think a single team has held the Ravens to less than 166 yards rushing. Now, that does include a loss at home to the Philadelphia Eagles, I think 2 weeks later. The last 2 weeks, absolute domination utilizing the run game, multiple option concepts, whether it's out of the pistol or the running back to the right and left of the quarterback, which I would generally call A gun or B gun, or a diamond formation that Lamar busted a 48-yard touchdown against the Texans in last week's win on Christmas Day. Let's get to the film. And like I said, I've got 12 plays queued up here. Generally, we'll have the all-22 and the end zone angle for you. Consider this an establishing shot or a foundational look at a zone read concept. Sometimes it's not zone. Sometimes it's a pin pull concept. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to necessarily delve into all of that, but we will talk about trap concepts and pin pull as it relates to zone blocking schemes a little bit later on. So this is 12 personnel, and it's twin slot. You're going to get motion across by Zay Flowers, and then it's an arc release option concept. So arc release means that the tight end at the point of attack, in this case, there's two tight ends there. The interior one is Isaiah Likely. He's going to release to the outside. So, in fact, is Mark Andrews. So you get this dual arc release. We would not refer to the outside tight end as an arc release for multiple reasons. Number one, he's got someone lined up to his interior, to his inside. That D end has been isolated. Lamar reads him correctly. Henry takes it downhill. This is obviously filmed from the Ravens' win at the Houston Texans on Christmas Day. End zone angle from the same play. Every option isn't an arc release. I'm just using this one as an establishing shot. You can pretend that Likely is not there if you wish. It would still be an option play. You just wouldn't call it an arc release. The outside release is designed to give the DN/outside linebacker something to possibly respond to. Oftentimes at the NFL level, these guys are not responding to it at all when they get the running back to their side. In this case, he's been widened up so much that there's a ton of space available, number one. Number two, you have inside linebackers and second-level defenders playing with their toes at 5, and they're not really coming downhill. So this is quite easy for the Ravens to get a combo here, base block there, and let Derrick Henry find the gap and get 6 or 8 yards quite easily. Again, consider that an establishing or foundational shot of what we're talking about. Now, the most interesting part that the Ravens have done recently involves what I would say is false pulls. Essentially utilizing a pulling guard to give a inside linebacker or second-level defender a false key to step to or step with, and that would open themselves up to an angled block by an offensive lineman and or a tight end. Now, this is actually trap. It ends up looking like, in live speed, watching this live, it ends up looking like a read play. I don't actually believe that this is a read by Lamar. First of all, it's a great job of him handling the snap and then actually still getting the ball to Derrick Henry. But what you are going to have here up front is not zone blocking. Yes, the Ravens are leaving the end man on the line of scrimmage, the D end unblocked. He goes for Lamar, so you could say that's a give read. When you get the end zone angle, you'll see that this is really just a trap scheme, old school trap. But when we watch it live on TV, myself included, sometimes we don't see that blocking scheme as it develops because it happens so quickly. This is the M-man on the line of scrimmage. He's not the player who's going to be trapped. A trap concept involves a defensive lineman, oftentimes a defensive tackle, kind of going upfield and then getting himself kicked out. And in this case, the trap scheme involves Tyler Linderbaum back blocking on the defensive tackle, Falele pulling and trapping this defensive tackle right here. Now that tackle is also being given an influence movement by Pat McCarry, the left guard. So since McCarry is pulling here to trap this defensive end, that has widened up this defensive tackle. You would call this an influence trap concept, meaning that defensive tackle is responding to McCarry, which is having dual purpose. It's not only is it widening him up for the run lane for Derrick Henry, but it's also making it really easy for Daniel Falele to trap him or kick him out and create an even larger lane for Henry to take this downhill. It almost looked too easy against the Texans sometimes. And I think part of that, to be honest with you, is how the Texans and the Steelers, to a certain extent, are playing these defensive ends against the option. Basically running them upfield with some hesitation at times, slight hesitation, forcing a give read. And now we can do so many things in here from a blocking scheme standpoint, whether it's zone, whether it's pin pull, which is still essentially zone, whether it's trap or tackle dart, where the tackle pulls and the running back follows that pulling tackle. We can get anything done that we want because we understand the read that we're going to receive or that we're going to get for the quarterback from that defensive end. So starting from the left to the right, you've got a combo or double team by the fullback and tight end, essentially lined up as two tight ends. Also, great angle blocks by Stanley, Linderbaum, and also Rosengarten. Because we're getting free releases against this essentially 4-3 look by the Texans, they really, I thought, came in unprepared for the regular option game, which I would say is just zone read type stuff. And then these adaptations, evolutions, improvements, wrinkles that Todd Monken has showing lately, in my opinion, have just made things even more difficult to defend. This trap concept is going to be the biggest part of this for me, even though I think I only have 5 iterations of this, of an actual trap concept, not Wham trap, in the last 2 weeks. This is against the Steelers the week before at home, a critical win for the Ravens that helped them climb even with Pittsburgh in the AFC North race. Now have an opportunity next week to clinch it with a regular season home finale against the Browns. 11 personnel, and I'm calling this trap read. You definitely get a false pull here by this left guard that would influence the inside linebacker to the field, in this case Peyton Wilson. Is it designed to go exactly where Derrick Henry cuts it? It's possible that it is not. I'm entirely willing to admit that McCarry is trapping this defensive tackle here, 95, Benton. And 95's reaction is somewhat similar to the reaction that you saw last week by the Texans. It's an influence with the right guard, which in effect widens him up. Rosengarten is not touching that D tackle. He's working up to the second level. What I'm most interested in here is a couple of things. We've got a bubble concept to the top side with Zay Flowers. So that's going to occupy these 3 defenders, number 1. Number 2, the read man, the outside linebacker, I think it's Preston Smith, 91, is coming upfield. So again, we have a reliable read that we've been given, meaning Lamar is going to give this football. And downhill, we have created, in my opinion, another layer to this option concept. There's the trap by McCarry, which is circled or spot shadowed. And when you get the end zone angle, you'll see the conflict that's created. Now, there's something a little wonky here and maybe anomalous, and that's the defensive tackle's reaction to the back block by Tyler Linderbaum. But functionally, you've got a read option where Lamar gives it to the running back. Additional to that, you've got trips or 3 receivers to the side of the running back, and they're running a bubble. with a go by number 1, making it look like we could throw that out there to Zay Flowers in space. Finally, along with that, and I already kind of covered this in another video, since Henry is crossing the face of Lamar, and you've got bubble action up here and a go by number 1, which I think is Bateman, the fourth element, potentially, would be Lamar keeping this football and then running out into the space, but that's prevented because this defensive end / outside linebacker post-snap gives Lamar what's called a keep read, meaning, a give read, meaning give the football to Derrick Henry, don't keep it out in space. That's been generally the Steelers' answer for any option concept dating back to 2019. So let's talk about, well, there's the read man that spot shadowed a little bit off screen for you guys to the right. So Peyton Wilson, he's getting a key to respond to. And so what that key is Pat McCarry pulling and crossing behind Linderbaum. And so you can see that takes Peyton Wilson, number 41, with him. Additional to that, Stanley is coming downhill and almost comboing Hayward, almost kind of bumping him to this front side and then working to seal Peyton Wilson. Well, with the great vision that Derrick Henry has, like I said, it's entirely possible that this is just a post-snap reaction by Derrick Henry, a read, and taking this to open space. It also works out that you could sell me that this is intentional. Now, I do actually think that this is supposed to be a trap concept. Here's 95 being slapped by Rosengarten. You can see he's slapping his outside arm, and that is to influence or help set up the trap by McCarry. Theoretically, this could be the same point of attack as we saw against the Texans on the last play. Henry downhill here. But again, you have this kind of stacked nature of Wilson and Hayward. Why? Well, it's because Stanley kind of bumps 97 Hayward, and Wilson is reacting to the pulling guard. The pulling guard was McCarry. If you run it, I'll run it back one more time so you can see Peyton Wilson's reaction to it. The way that this works out is like a false key. Now, false key breakers would be like in a wing T system, a guard pulling in this direction, but the run concept going in the opposite direction. That's a very simplistic explanation for it. But when I do these types of videos, I have to try to explain things in a certain way that encompasses a wide range of football understanding and background and experiences. So if that's too simplistic for you because of your coaching background or whatever, forgive me for that. But a key breaker, a false key, takes you away from the point of attack. That's how this works, even though I do think that the point of attack is designed to be here. You can kind of see by Rosengarten's block. Essentially, what I'm offering to you is the Ravens have added a wrinkle to option plays, to the run game, late in the 2024 season that almost makes it even more dangerous to just force a give read all the time, especially when you have a guy like Derrick Henry back there. Historically, the way the Steelers have played the option game is get that outside linebacker to force a give read. And now in the last 2 weeks, the Ravens seem to have evolved or shown some wrinkles, advancements that really, I think, would destroy that type of defensive scheme. In my opinion, we may see a whole bunch of keep reads in the playoffs because we now have a considerable amount of film late in the season of teams getting absolutely gashed by forcing a give read to Derrick Henry. We can block those things. We've got multiple variations to block those fronts, and Derrick Henry is exceptional at reading it on the run and then making it work regardless of what the scheme is. So another version of trap, now this is not a read, this is a key point to mention here. This is Wham trap. It's just a designed run concept, but a couple of things. You couldn't have a more, quote, loaded box to deal with, right? Anytime you've got a wing alignment, you're generally going to face or see a hard corner and a strong safety who's playing at some depth. Typically, our alignment would be 7 to 9 yards with a strong safety, reading the tight end tackle combo for run pass and pass concept release. The Texans have kind of just stacked 5 guys. It almost looks like, to be kind of elementary or rudimentary in my explanation, a 4-5 look pre-snap. It's a Wham trap. So Pat Ricard is trapping the defensive tackle. And while you may not have a false key here necessarily, you do have the element of Ricard pinning down on this D tackle. And at the same time that that's occurring, Pat McCarry, the left guard, is pulling to trap the other D tackle on the opposite side. And that can have an impact in a 4-3 structure, a team that's reading, primarily reacting to the guard, in this case McCarry. It's not exactly what occurs here. We do get the pin down block, the wham trap, if you will, by Ricard on the D tackle. Henry presses downhill immediately. These trap concepts, letting Henry get downhill on people, first of all, they've been incredibly effective lately, most particular, but also it exploits, in my opinion, the defense, basically by setting up great angles for us to block with. So number one, the angle that's great for us is Ricard pinning down on the defensive tackle. Number two, Stanley has a great angle to go get the edge defender here, while Ricard pins down on the defensive tackle. Again, that's the wham portion of it. Finally, because of the triple trap here and here, we get free releases by Linderbaum and Rosengarten to hold off the Mike linebacker and the Will. And then Andrews finally has an angle to go get the front side inside linebacker. I guess you'd have to refer to that as the Sam. Essentially, everyone has an angle here that they can deal with. No one is operating underneath of the guy they've got to block, meaning no one has to be exceptional with a reach or a combo. There is, in fact, no combos here. This is all trap blocking, gap schemes, if you will, where everyone has got great angles to get set up, and you open up a huge lane. Now, does that work against a 3-4 team in a traditional look? Well, no, not necessarily. You're in odd technique, so you open yourself up to down blocks and such. Is it a one-time use play? Well, we did hit the Texans twice with this one. A wham trap is a beautiful concept. If you don't recall, that's the touchdown that Derrick Henry had on the first play of the game against the Buffalo Bills in our home win in Week 4. These trap concepts are, well, they're traditional, they're conventional. They've been used for decades. At the NFL level, trap seems to have made a comeback in the last 2 or 3 years, in my opinion. This is a different version of what some would call trap. I actually think it's more of a false read here, or false pull. And so what I'm talking about is the right guard, Falele, gonna require the end zone angle to kind of really cover this one fully. But you've got a lot of things going on up front, and we still have great angles to get it done. It looks very similar to wham trap, and I can't fault anyone for calling it wham trap. It's actually not a trap concept, because I believe that this is the most clear example that the Ravens are pulling guards, pulling offensive linemen to play tricks on or play games with second-level defenders, particularly inside linebackers. So to be specific about what we're talking about, is we're talking about that inside linebacker that's spot shadowed, and this D tackle responding to Daniel Falele, the right guard's pulling action from right to left. I'll let this flow through multiple times so you guys can see the reaction of the inside linebacker, who ends up stacked over Falele. He steps with Falele, number one. Number two, as Falele pulls to trap here, yes, there is a trap function happening, but that is not the point of attack. The point of attack is here, off of Rosengarten's down block. Essentially, this works out like wham trap, how Ricard, if you recall, now we have a mirrored or flipped version of it, Ricard blocked down on the 3 technique, the defensive tackle, and then Stanley, again, because we're talking about the other play that I showed, stepped out to the edge defender. They just get this accomplished a different way. This is just a Jill call. The other way to get this done would be a jack call, meaning the wide receiver / wing steps to the edge defender, and then 42, in this case Ricard, leads up to the front side inside linebacker. The players make this call on the field depending on the alignment of the defense. As it relates to the false pulling nature of it, when you see where this hits, it clearly hits downhill here. You've got Falele trapping back, Makari trapping back, Linderbaum working up to get that inside linebacker who was, again, influenced by the pulling lineman, Falele, and then Stanley with a great angle to go get the backside inside linebacker. This is all very well coordinated. A lot of this is checks on the field, don't get me wrong, meaning the defensive alignment kind of predetermines it. I wonder how many more four-man front 4-3 looks we're going to get. Of course, Houston did have some success running a 5-man front at times. The announcer even talked about it. Again, you can get it done over here with a wham trap concept, but since Ricard's feet are on the line, it's going to be a little bit tougher to get done because in the wham trap concept, like I showed earlier, he's going to pin down on this defensive tackle while the tackle to his side, the play side tackle, in this case Rosengarten, is going to step to the edge defender and create that seam downhill through what functionally is C-gap. Final element to this is you got a Jill, ISO, or lead with Tylan Wallace. Yes, it ends up being a short gain, so it's not as impressive as some of the other plays. The false pull, I think, is the biggest portion here for me. It's the biggest part of this in that you are influencing that inside linebacker to move in this direction. And then what that does is allow Linderbaum to get out and seal him off, further exacerbating or potentially opening up that lane, that downhill lane for Henry. Teams are going to have a lot of film study to do to get prepared for where this Ravens run game is as we get to preparing for Week 18. I'm not saying it's unstoppable. I think that there will be teams who will blitz and bring pressure early downs to try to shut us down as much as possible. I'm kind of reminded of Week 1 against the Chiefs when we gave them formations that were a little predictable. They played downhill. They attacked. They didn't sit back and let us just run the ball down their throat. I think these formations are a little less predictable, and I can't prove it yet because I haven't been keeping my database up completely this year, so that's one of the things that probably makes my content a little less effective or less convincing for some of the things that I'm trying to give you a heads up on or explain to the best of my knowledge. Moving on to a different concept. I feel like I have to cover this. I've seen so much talk about these plays that I wanted to show a sequence of them, or a series, so that you could consider the read that Lamar and Likely are both making, what they're both asked to do in the heat of the moment. This is a dual read, and I'm fine if people want to believe that it is not. I certainly won't decry anyone who doesn't have. I've had a lot of resources, people to help me as a coach, a person trying to learn about the game, and then since trying to do NFL analysis, people that I could call and say, hey, can you look at this play for me and help me understand it? This is a dual read. And so what I mean when I say dual read is that Lamar and Isaiah Likely are both reading that edge defender. And there's people who will draw this up and say, oh, Likely's going to insert underneath of the edge defender. Well, how does he know what the edge defender is going to do? He doesn't know, which is why it's a read. It's a reaction to the defensive player's movement post-snap. Likely veers inside at the same time that Lamar gives the football. That's not an accident. Those things are happening because they're both reading the same thing and they're reacting to it in the same manner. Somewhere around 2019, in 2020, the Ravens went away from a diamond formation where the fullback / tight end read the edge defender from here, and they moved him over to this side, and they needed a little bit more athletic guy with some more speed, agility, and quickness than Pat Ricard to get it done. Isaiah Likely fits the role. I'll give you the end zone angle so you can see it. Again, I'm comfortable if people don't have the same evaluation or opinion that it's a dual read. In my opinion, it's not a coincidence that these things occur when they do. It's a give read to the running back, first of all, by Lamar. We have to accept that, number one. Number two, Likely ends up veering underneath of the same edge defender that Lamar is reading. What happens here is if Lamar were to keep it, and we've seen this so many times in 2024, let's say this edge defender violently charged after Derrick Henry. It's my contention Lamar would keep it, run around the edge, and Isaiah Likely would read it, bounce around the edge outside as well, and go lead block for Lamar Jackson. Hence the name dual read. It's actually not my term. I took it from the best option coach that I know, who took some time to explain it to me pretty much 2 years ago and give me a better understanding, better opportunity to try to explain some of these concepts. Now, you got some problems with the Steelers defense. We're not necessarily talking about those here. I've actually shown this play in another video, but the combination or the culmination of all the work that's been put in the last 2 weeks, it's a cheat code for Likely to be able to read this. Yeah, Henry takes it front side. He doesn't, quote, follow Likely. It's a zone blocking scheme. Henry can take it front side, or he can wind it back. That read by Likely sets up the opportunity for a cutback to be an even bigger gain, if you ask me. Another dual read, and you're going to get a great angle of Likely's response, his reaction to the edge defender, because we're so in line with the line of scrimmage here, just on the right-hand portion of our screen. Now, it is my opinion that the Texans came in with a bad game plan. It's my opinion they came with a bad game plan for the option, because there was a point in time where we pretty much knew what the edge defender was going to do. He's going to run upfield and force a give read. Check out Likely here. It seems like he certainly knows exactly where to go because it's a tight path. It's also possible post-snap that the edge defender could come down the line of scrimmage and violently follow or chase Henry and try to tackle him from behind, in which case Lamar would have to keep it. And if you accept my assertion that Likely's reading it, he would have to loop to the outside. Now, his angle, his path here, Likely's, is not nearly as flat as normal. It is certainly underneath of that edge defender. Maybe Lamar got a pre-snap read. Maybe we knew or understood what they were going to do because they were in a too-high structure. So what I mean by that is, if you're in a too-high structure and the D-end outside linebacker runs down the line of scrimmage and Likely loops around, well, now you've got a 2-on-1, in my opinion. So what I mean by 2-on-1 would be Lamar keeping it around the edge, Likely looping to the outside to go block this boundary side inside linebacker / strong safety, whoever it is, whatever positional designation a player has to the boundary. The point is, to be sound defensively, they either have to feather it or go upfield and force a give read. I'm not a huge fan of forcing a give read all the time, in my opinion, but I'm offering to you a possible explanation as to why Lamar and or Isaiah Likely may have known that this was going to be a give read. Look, you practice this initially on air, where coaches, you tell the players to read, so you get the timing, so you can practice the width. When I say the width, I'm not talking about the running back and the quarterback. I'm talking about the width of this guy. And so what I mean is, think of the first play of the game against the Texans. Ricard was here. He tried the same read, and he was so slow in this area here. If you recall, Derrick Henry collided with Ricard on a downhill path. Likely's the perfect guy for it because, well, Andrews too, but Likely because he's a little bigger, a little thicker and stronger, more explosive athlete blocking, if you ask me, even though he's not always consistent. But he's also a great receiving threat. So we can put him there and we can maintain the ability to run to either side of the formation and or keep the ball in Lamar's hands, possibly throw the football to Likely or Andrews as well. There's the edge defender. I think it's Will Anderson, but I could be wrong. And give to Derrick Henry, who's going to wind it back. And again, you have the element of Likely out in front because he's reading the same thing as Lamar. So we've covered a couple things here so far. We've covered trap, what looks like trap read a little bit against the Steelers. Also covered a Wham trap, the Jill ISO trap look, which is really just a blocking adaptation by the offensive line. And then now we've got the dual read. One more look at it against the Texans. Another great, it's a pristine example, in my opinion, of Likely's adjustment to the path. Now, Macari also gets knocked back into his lap a little bit. It's a 3rd and 3. Look at Likely's shoulders veer inside and then back out. Why? Because he's reading the edge defender the same way Lamar is. And think of the previous play. He was able to, when that DN went upfield, he was able to insert underneath, and Henry could follow him. Well, now it's the same concept, except he loops to the outside, and he can go get the boundary side guy, the same player essentially that I pointed out to you guys on the previous snap. If the defensive end / outside linebacker forced a keep read, like you get right here. Lamar, likely, reading the same thing, reacting to it, putting the defense in a tremendous amount of conflict, particularly to the boundary. In my opinion, these are the types of situations in the playoffs where it'll be interesting to me to see what teams do with their safeties when the ball is on the hash and a running back, particularly Derrick Henry's, to the boundary with Isaiah likely to the field in the slot. Perfect setup to run the dual read concept down into the boundary, take advantage of that space where we already almost have a half-man advantage, and then when you bring Likely and Lamar into play, we can end up almost a full man or man and a half up into the boundary. You may not have noticed it on the all-22 angle. I didn't necessarily point it out. I talked about it before the ball was snapped. Likely ends up kind of having to bow back a little bit. Another thing that tells me that Likely is dual reading this is the fact where he's looking. And then when we get to the diamond formation, you'll see what I'm talking about. Likely's not staring across at the edge defender. He knows where he is. Likely knows where Will Anderson is. Likely has to veer his path a little bit because of Macari being bowed back or stunted back a little bit. The timing is perfect because the width has been practiced, meaning Likely's width, how wide he is compared to the tackle. All of these guys splits their width, and then Likely's is built off of that such that it's perfect. It's modular, if you will, and we can't mess it up. Ends up being a conversion, like I said, on a 3rd and 3. It's not a predetermined path for Isaiah Likely. It's not well, sometimes it's a predetermined give or a keep. We're just making it look like an option, like that trap play. I think the second play that I showed you. But the key point here for me is that we can get a lead blocker out in front of Lamar in space, out on the edge, because of Likely's read, or we can get a lead blocker or / cutback blocker out in front of Henry or Keaton Mitchell or Justice Hill if it ends up being a give read. Hopefully I explain that in a way that makes sense. Now let's put it all together. The first play I showed you guys, I said I considered it foundational because it was an arc release, meaning a predetermined arc release path. That's what you're going to get here with Mark Andrews. He's not reading this edge defender. He's going to arc release to the outside and go get the first guy that shows up. Normally the numbering for the option team starts from the sideline, so you would consider that number 1, depending on the system that people use. The other portion of this would be the actual dual read, which was by Isaiah Likely. So because it's diamond, you get the arc release and the dual read at the same time because you have 2 players to execute. 1, Andrews, the arc release. 2, Likely, the dual read. There's the edge defender. Andrews is predetermined, the arc or the loop, whatever you want to call it. Likely has to read it. Comes down the line again, so both of them loop out in front. On the broadcast, it was presented as if that's predetermined by Likely. It is not. It is a read where Likely and Lamar are expected to react to it in the same manner, in coordination and combination, and it works perfectly. Ends up being a 48-yard touchdown by Lamar. I think really put the game away, made it 24-2 in the 3rd quarter. End zone angle, same play. I talked about this a little bit in a video last week. So the distance between Likely and Lamar and the distance between Andrews and Lamar is a very heavy, sharp pre-snap indicator as to where the option is going to go. Meaning we're not going to arc release Likely out here and dual read Andrews on this defensive end. Why? Because Andrews is just too daggone wide. He'll never get there out in front of Lamar. But in any case, diamond formation presents some difficulty for the defense. We do still have a tendency where we're running it to Ricard almost all the time. You'll see another iteration of this in a moment, where Ricard is to our left, and lo and behold, we run the option to our left. Final piece of this is that Henry is running off the midline to the backside. So really trying to create horizontal conflict in the 2 options here, meaning option 1, the dive to Henry following this path, and then option 2, Lamar, the quarterback, following this outside path. A typical veer option, even though it's not necessarily always veer blocking. So let's do it the other way. To our left, that's the read man now. We know this, well, I know this because I set the film up, number one, but number two, even if I didn't see the play, we've got Ricard here, number one. Number two, we've got Likely closer to Lamar. So we know that Likely is set in that precise width to get to the top side. Now, either Lamar was told to give this, number one, or him and Likely did not read it in combination together. I do know this, because we're incapable of comboing here at right guard, we leave a second-level defender unblocked, and that's why Derrick Henry runs back towards the read man. Derrick Henry veers back to the read man, kind of makes it look like Lamar misread this a little bit more. In my opinion, this should be a give, which is exactly what Lamar did. We're not able to get to the second level here. You will get the end zone angle in a moment. And as a result, Derrick Henry sees that color jersey in front of his face, so he veers off path. And what I mean by that is I just drew it up from the previous play. We're now reversed. Watch Likely take his alignment. He's getting a landmark. My guess is his landmark is inside foot, halfway the midpoint of the feet of the right guard. That's my guess here. It could be a little bit closer in this direction, meaning it could be a little bit more towards the right foot. I'm not sure. I just know that you get a pretty clear indicator that Likely is taking an alignment to be able to execute his assignment, which is to either insert and go get someone on the front side or loop around the edge defender if it ends up being a keep read for Lamar. There's the same width that we talked about. I think it's a giveaway. Obviously, I'd like to see some balancing of their width at this point. We have to cut it back because Henry sees the other team's jersey flash in front of his face. I mean, we're still going to have trouble because we've got an unblocked DB here. But because we have difficulty comboing at right guard, it's just a reality. I recognize people aren't going to like hearing that. But Falele's not a great combo blocker, especially when he's got to move laterally. And this is a good example of it. Henry sees that defender flash, so he veers back into the read man that Lamar, I think probably read correctly. And in this case, it ends up only being a 2-yard gain. Couple little things to add on here. This is a zone scheme, and this is going to build off of the idea that I just showed you here a moment ago. And this is what I'm getting to, a larger point that I didn't really touch on in the lead-in. I think part of the reason why we're using false pulls and pulling guards so much on some of our downhill stuff, particularly out of the pistol, is that we recognize that we can't combo on the right-hand side of the offensive line. So this is a 4-3 look by the Steelers, and it's an option read, but we're pulling the right tackle. Right tackle's going to pull, and we're pinning with the right guard, Falele. Now, Rosengarten isn't able to finish off Patrick Queen here, so we've got a loss there. But the point is, why are we doing this? Why are we trying to get this accomplished? Because we recognize what TJ Watt's probably going to do, which is the same thing he's done since like 2019 against these concepts. Run up field, force the quarterback to give it. We've spaced out or cleared out 3 players to cover these 3. They've got the free safety. So from a numbers standpoint, we really feel like we're playing 7 on 6 in here. And if Lamar reads it correctly, which he usually does, then we're going to have the opportunity to get significant, consistent yards against their defensive front. And we did, and we did. It's a little bit of an atypical way to handle it. This is not meant to be extremely derogatory. This is just my observation because we're not able to combo consistently. And I actually did say this after the Steelers game. This is an adaptation that we used to help out Falele. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing as coaches to be able to recognize what we can and cannot get accomplished. Over here, we combo. Also because that's to the front side, but we're trying to get up to Queen. We would not be able to do that if we comboed it with Rosengarten. Falele's not going to have the agility to get up there and do that. Rosengarten does. So this is just smart coaching, smart adaptation, if you ask me. It's still a zone run concept, but it's a pin pull adaptation or adjustment on the backside. Gives us an opportunity to get up to the second level, perhaps a little quicker. Does Rosengarten need to win that matchup against Patrick Queen? Yes, absolutely he does. Reflecting back on the first play that I showed you, the arc release option, hopefully you have a little bit more familiarity with the types of options that we're running. My main point here for a lot of this is that I think the Ravens' evolution has been simultaneously forced by some of our own limitations, particularly our guards, but also shown to us, meaning the Steelers have for years ran the outside linebackers upfield to force a give read. And as a result, it's my belief that the Ravens coaching staff started to look at it and say, okay, if we know that the player is going to do this, the read man, what are the things that we could do here with the angles we've been given to kind of accentuate or improve upon or make our option game more dangerous? I do think they've done that. I think that the Ravens coaching staff has made the option game more dangerous in the last couple of weeks. It's also possible that the Steelers and the Texans have taught or shown other defenses that we're going to face in the future how not to defend our option game. That's entirely possible. There may be a defense that says we want to force a keep read by Lamar. We want to make him run the ball 15, 18 times. We would like for him to have to throw under physical duress, meaning run the football for 8 yards, and then the very next play have to throw the football, go through regular quarterback reads, regular quarterback progressions after your heart rate is elevated, after maybe he's juked someone, had to stiff arm, or get down at the bottom of a pile such that he doesn't get hurt. There may be a team that takes that perspective. It was interesting to me to hear D'Amico Ryan's opinion before our game against the Texans on Christmas Day that he wanted to force Lamar to give the football so much. That clearly ended up not matching up well with what our offensive game plan was and our ability to make adjustments late in the season and even during the game on how we block things with the angles that they presented us. I'm really interested in what teams do. The Cleveland Browns have always been a four-man front team, at least in recent years, particularly under Schwartz as a defensive coordinator. And they have varied the read up a little bit more than the Steelers, meaning sometimes the DN goes down the line, sometimes the DN goes directly at Lamar, so there's a read portion. There's some more added weight to Lamar post-snap in terms of his reaction. He's not going to know exactly what that defensive end is going to do on each particular snap. In any case, you guys let me know what you think of my explanation as to why I think these blocking improvements / adaptations / evolutions have occurred. I understand that it may not be well received by some people to accept that the reason why we're rushing for more yards recently and being more efficient and more dangerous is because our coaching staff has recognized some of the limitations or the things we don't do well, and they're trying to limit our exposure there or mitigate risk. I recognize that there may be some pushback on that, and I'm comfortable with it. Appreciate you guys' time, man. Let me know what you think of the video in the comment section. My thoughts on how we're creating key breakers / false keys, whether intentional or not at times for the defense, and using the angles that the Steelers and Texans gave us specifically to really gash them in the run game and get their defense back on the heels, such that it really makes me question or wonder what teams are going to do in the future as a reaction to what we've witnessed the last 2 weeks. Finally, if you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this rather lengthy film study look at our option game late in the 2024 season, please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.